Well, let's have an in-depth discussion now with Peter Roff, who's a journalist who joins us from Washington, D.C. Welcome to you, Peter. Great to have you with us. We're also joined by Nassem Haffar, who is a researcher in American affairs and a member of the Democratic Party. Thank you very much indeed, both of you, for joining us. We're going to be talking mostly about immigration. And since you're in New York, Nassem, and since Mamdani, the new mayor-elect of New York, came out with that phrase, "I am an immigrant." Well, indeed he is. He's 34 years old, appeared from nowhere, defied the odds and won the mayoral race. I just wondered what sort of a debate has his election to that top office in New York generated there?
Well, New York is a city with a huge immigrant population. And I think the success of Zohran Mamdani is really a reflection of his ability to bring a lot of these immigrant communities who have no history of voting. He brought them in and encouraged them to go out and vote. Basically, these were marginalized communities, whether it's Bangladeshis or Arab Americans or from Africa. These are communities that historically have not participated in the voting process. He was successful in motivating these communities to come out and vote, and that is really one of the reasons of his success a couple of days ago.
Peter, let me just ask you, you're sort of a bit further away from the action there in Washington, D.C., and I just wondered what sort of impression it had made, do you think, on Americans, broadly speaking, that the largest city in the United States has a Muslim mayor-elect who's young, one of the youngest mayors in many decades. How much debate has this generated across the nation, would you say?
Well, it's, again, good to be with you. Thank you for having me. There isn't a lot of talk about him being a Muslim. There isn't a lot of talk about him being young. There's a lot of talk about him being a socialist. And I think that the Republican Party has decided that they are going to run in 2026 against what they perceive to be the damage that Mamdani is going to do to New York City. Now, it is true that he started the race with 1% of the vote, but you have to look at the candidate field. It was a weak field. The incumbent mayor was highly unpopular and accused of corruption. The only real alternative was a governor who had to resign from office under cloud, who had been guilty of sending COVID patients into nursing homes, spreading the disease and killing people, and then working to cover it up. So it's not surprising that the new mayor is somebody that we hadn't heard of a year ago. The most interesting statistic, though, from the exit polls for me is that Mamdani won the votes of only 3 out of 10 people who were born in New York City. He won the votes of 8 out of 10 people who weren't born there. And he does reflect the cosmopolitan nature of what we understand New York City to be. I grew up just outside New York City. I consider myself a native New Yorker. And I don't think that we should be surprised terribly by this result. I do think that he was able to stitch together an active coalition of everyone who perceives they have a grievance with Donald Trump and the Trump administration, which in a place like New York City is a lot of people. In fact, as we've just seen, it's enough
let me
to
disagree with that.
Mayor.
Okay, Nassem, let me hear what you've got to say about that.
Okay, so a couple of points here. One, the fact that I think his religion was a factor. It was a factor in the sense that it generated opposition from a lot of Islamophobes in the country, not only around the country, but also even in New York City. That's one. Second, I think Mamdani's success, obviously, he motivated the immigrant communities to come out and vote, but also a lot of young voters, not immigrants, but native-born Americans, young voters who found in him somebody who speaks their language, the language of affordability, something that many of our elected people have not really focused on. I think Zohran Mamdani was able to stay on message. Basically, affordability is an issue for a lot of New Yorkers, and that is one of the main reasons he was successful.
Okay, how do you respond to that, Peter?
I agree with everyone that affordability is an issue, especially in a place like New York City, where it's $3,000 a month to rent a closet. The problem is that, and again, even these younger voters were not born in New York. They have come to New York for other parts of the country. 8 out of 10 people who voted for Mamdani were not born in New York City. Okay, they may have been born in America.
Nassem, just hold that thought for a second, Nassem. Go ahead, Peter. Just
and
let me finish your point.
They are suffering from sticker shock. New York City is a very expensive place to live. Mamdani has made a lot of promises. City government run grocery stores, free bus rides, rent caps. We'll see if he's able to enforce them and what that does to the marketplace. The problem, as Margaret Thatcher famously said many years ago, with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. And the people who provide the economic resources on which New York runs are threatening to move to places like Florida and Texas, where they have no state income tax, where they will be immune from Mamdani's new tax structure that he's talking about trying to impose on the city. And so what you may have is a wealth flight out of New York, which is actually going to compound the affordability problem rather than resolve it. It's going to be interesting to see how that works out over the next couple of years.
Okay, we need to pivot to the subject of immigration and away from policies in Mamdani's campaign and in the New York mayoral race. But I'll let you respond to that briefly, Nassem, and then we'll move on to discussing immigration.
Okay, so a lot of the young people who voted for Mamdani were not immigrants. Yes, a lot of immigrants voted for him, but also many native-born Americans. In fact, he got 35% of the Jewish vote in New York, and most of these people were young voters, and certainly not immigrants. They were native-born Americans. So that's one thing. As far as
I didn't say they weren't. I just said they weren't born in New York City.
Okay, well that's fine. I mean, 3/4 of New York City people are not born in New York. We have people from across the country, but in any case, just going back to the socialism, going back to this quote unquote socialism question, rent freeze.
It's not a quote unquote socialism question. He calls himself a socialist.
Fine, but as far as some of the issues that he is pushing for, rent freeze on stabilized apartments, that has been done before. This is not a radical idea. It has been done before in New York City. And as far as universal childcare, this is something that I think most, not only New Yorkers, but a lot of people in the US favor, because many working mothers cannot afford to work without having childcare services provided for them. So I think these are issues that I think for a lot of people are very important.
Let's move on to the issue of immigration. It was the hot button issue in the United States. It was a headline story across the world. The ICE raids taking place. A lot of talk about building walls on the southern border. I mean, that seems to have all gone a little bit quiet in recent days and weeks. Peter, is that my imagination?
No, it's not your imagination. And the reason it's gone quiet is because the border between the U.S. and Mexico has the fewest illegal crossings it's had, or attempts at illegal crossings, as it's had in 50 or 60 years, because the first thing that President Trump did when he came into office was effectively shut the border down. That has eased the minds of many Americans for whom immigration, illegal immigration, the problems associated with the porous border was top of mind. They are now focused on the economy. And while the record inflation of the Biden years is no longer with us, it is still too high at 3%, driven again by too much federal spending. And the Trump administration, frankly, has failed to get its hands around the problem of prices. And so the affordability problem not only affects New York City, but it affects places all over the country. I think you saw some of that in the election returns in New Jersey and Virginia on Tuesday, where the Democrats romped to easy victories in what are generally Democratic areas. But people are unhappy with how expensive things are. And Trump now owns the issue, and he has not focused enough on increasing productivity and economic growth in order to get prices down.
Okay, Nassem, what's your assessment? Do you think this issue of affordability, the economy more broadly, has eclipsed immigration precisely for the reasons that Peter was just giving us there? The lowest number of illegal border crossings on the southern border since 1970. Does that mean job done? Let's move on to another issue.
Well, I think, look, the immigration issue was a negative for the Democratic Party in the presidential elections because I think it was mishandled by the Biden administration. Having said that, the Democrats and Republicans in the Senate were on the verge of agreeing on an immigration policy, but then Trump, who was running for elections at that point, decided to torpedo those negotiations, and that's the reason why an immigration policy or an immigration agreement in Congress failed to materialize. Now, I think right now, immigration, it is true, it has not or was not a factor in the elections over the last couple of days. Having said that, I think many Americans are unhappy with the way that ICE, the immigration officers, are arresting people masked, with their faces masked. It's like, I think for many people, this is something that they did not ask for, and it's going to really hurt the Republican Party going forward.
Peter, your thoughts? This is going to backfire, says Nassem, on the Republican Party, especially those masked officers. What are your thoughts?
I don't think it does, especially when confronted with the truth that people understand what's going on here. The reason that the ICE officials are wearing masks and they're not wearing name tags is because they're being photographed and doxxed. Doxxed is when your picture and address are posted on the internet so people can go find you. The cartels have bounties on immigration officers, harassment, everything from harassment up to outright murder. And so they have to do this to protect themselves, and they're going after high-value targets, criminal illegals who are not just criminals because they entered the United States illegally or overstayed their visas, but who have committed crimes either in the country they came from or here in the United States. And I think we have every right, as every country does, to go after people who break laws and say you're not welcome here. Now, I think that where the Republicans have really gone wrong is that they have allowed the immigration message to be taken over by people who say they don't want foreigners in the country. And there's, on the list of stupid public policy choices, that's in the top 5. America was built by immigrants. America thrives because of the influx of immigrants. The reason that our population is at replacement rate, unlike every other Western democracy, is because of immigrants. And the people who come here largely are the ones who want to work hard and make a better life for themselves and for their children and grandchildren. And we all benefit from that activity. It's the rising tide lifts all boats phenomenon. They help raise the tide. We want immigrants in America. We especially want educated, skilled immigrants, but we want immigrants. We need immigrants. We just need them to come through a lawful process so that we know who's here and so that the public sector isn't overwhelmed. And there's a resistance to fixing that policy without being willing to grant amnesty to everyone who broke the law to come here. There has to be some kind of a compromise. I think
Let me push back on that.
But that would require a reduction in the politics that surround the issue.
Okay, Nassem, it doesn't sound like you agree with the idea that the Trump administration and these ICE raids are going after the right people. What are your thoughts?
Of course, they're not. When Trump was running for president, he said basically that they will focus on removing immigrants or refugees or undocumented immigrants who have committed crimes. The reality is most of the people that are being arrested or kidnapped with masked ICE officers are not or have not committed crimes. In fact, they're just people who have been around for 20 years, 25, 30 years, working, paying taxes. And I think that's really the problem that a lot of people in the U.S. are seeing. And they don't want, nobody wants masked people coming in, kidnapping people away from
one at a time, gentlemen. Let's let Nassem finish his point.
Nobody, I think most Americans are not happy with the fact that masked ICE officers or immigration officers go arrest people in front of their children, taking them and not knowing, basically, and their families not knowing where they end up. I think that's a problem that most Americans do not support.
Peter.
There's no survey data to indicate that. I think most Americans, frankly, don't care. If they believe that criminal activity is being suppressed, that cartels and gang members are the ones being arrested and detained and deported, if that's what's happening, and according to the official statistics released by ICE, that is what's happening. Tom Homan, the president's immigration control czar, has made that very clear. I think that they are largely supportive of the activity. There are a fringe of people who are out there paid by political interests, some of them foreign, who are deliberately trying to stir up trouble around this issue. But I don't think it's something that most Americans lie in bed at night worried about. I think they lie in bed worried about whether or not they're going to have a job, what the cost of their health care is going to be, how much it costs for a dozen eggs, and whether or not they're going to be able to keep their house because of their mortgage payment. Some of the economic indicators are good, and the overall health of the economy is strong. Wages need to be rising faster and higher. Federal spending needs to come down. Interest rates need to come down. The president can't control that, but he needs to get a handle on spending. And I'm hopeful that once the government shutdown issue is resolved, and it is resolved through a clean continuing resolution without continuing these outrageous Medicaid subsidies, that we will have a conversation about how to get spending back under control. We know inflation comes when too much money is injected into the system. And under Biden, we had 4 years of continual, what they called economic stimulus, that was just driving inflation up and up and up.
Okay, Nassem, I saw you shaking your head a little bit there. What did you want to say?
Well, first of all, as far as the Medicaid subsidies or Medicare subsidies that the individual is talking about, well, let's face the reality here. If without those subsidies that the Democrats are pushing for, medical insurance rates will skyrocket for millions and millions of Americans. Now, the gentleman from across the side from me, basically he does not think, or he agrees with the fact that tax cuts should continue, the tax cuts that Trump implemented in his first term. He says those should continue, but Medicare subsidies or healthcare subsidies
I didn't say a word about the tax cuts.
That's the problem.
Please don't put words in my mouth. I didn't say a word about the tax
cuts. Can we stick to immigration? Let's pivot back to immigration as quickly as possible.
Sure.
Okay. So I disagree with what the gentleman said, that the people who are being arrested are criminals. I think most of them are law-abiding people who do their work. But the fact that what the gentleman is saying, that Americans don't care that masked individuals are arresting people away from their families, I think I disagree with that 100%. I think most Americans don't want that, don't want to see parents being snatched away from their families and having their children basically be homeless.
You may think that the people being arrested are law-abiding, or largely law-abiding.
Most of them are.
They are also criminals because they're here illegally. But the official statistics show that not to be the case. I think if the Republican Party doesn't get it right on immigration, which is that we are opposed to illegal immigration, but we love immigrants and we welcome them because they are actually much more in line with the free market vision of the economy than they are with the socialist vision of the economy. And they are necessary to continue the American system and the American way of life. It will cost them badly at the polls. They think they're talking to a small group of people when they're actually talking to a large group of people, people like Japanese Americans and Indian Americans and Pakistani Americans and Vietnamese Americans and Polish Americans and Czech Americans and Serbian Americans, all of whom are high net worth by population group and ought to be supporting Republican candidates who want them to be able to keep more of what they worked so hard and came so far to earn. Instead, the nativist language is pushing them into the hands of the Democratic Party that wants to tax their wealth out of existence. It's nonsensical that the Republicans don't understand this.
Okay, Nassem, your thoughts on that? And also, I just want to put a question out to both of you, which is that when we did an assessment of President Trump's first 6 months in office, there were Democrats who told us that they thought, in fact, that President Trump had done a good job when it came to meeting his promises and tackling the issue of immigration in the United States. And Nassem, I'm wondering, as a Democrat, what you think of that? Do you think President Trump has, despite what it sounds like you think he's made some miscalculations, or you might not have liked everything he's done, but broadly speaking, do you think he's done what he said he was going to do? Do you think this is a case of promises made, promises kept?
Well, from that perspective, yes. I mean, he did. I would agree with that. He did say that he wants to stop immigrants' flow from the southern borders. And by all measures, that seems to have been the case, that he has succeeded in doing that. My problem is there needs to be an immigration policy that Democrats and Republicans should agree on. And the fact that President Trump torpedoed an agreement that was in the works before he got elected. There was an agreement that Republicans came up with that Democrats signed off on. He torpedoed that because he wanted to get elected. So I think there needs to be an immigration policy that, in many respects, supports what the gentleman said. We do need immigrants coming legally and lawfully into the country. But I think we have not been able to reach an agreement, Republicans and Democrats, putting a policy in place so that we don't have the problems that we have at the southern border.
And speaking of the southern border, Peter, what happened to the idea of the wall? Where are we on that? Because some of our viewers will be wondering.
It's still out there. It's still live. There's still construction. But because the flow of people across the border has been reduced to a trickle, the need for it, the urgency for it isn't felt like it was. I mean, Trump was elected, I think, in 2024, largely with the assignment to shut the border. 12, 14 million people minimum came across the border illegally in the 4 years of Joe Biden. No country, even a country of 300 million people like the United States, can absorb that kind of a shock without tremendous economic disruption. And I think we felt that. He has kept that promise. Now he's got to focus on economics, and he's got to get a handle on the prices. And I will say, frankly, in my view, the tariffs aren't helping. Tariffs are taxes. They're inflationary. They raise prices. They reduce productivity. They reduce exports. Not good. We do need an immigration deal. We need a new immigration system, but it needs to be a good deal. The deal that blew up, regardless of who blew it up or why, wasn't a good deal. I like very much the idea that President Trump has put forward of the golden ticket, the ability to buy H-1B visas, high-tech, specialization visas, and for people with high net worth to buy citizenship here in the United States. I think it is a wonderful idea to have wealth refugees coming to the United States, their fortunes intact as U.S. citizens. America lost out immeasurably because we wouldn't move the people who wanted to leave Hong Kong to the head of the line seeking citizenship when Hong Kong was taken over by the People's Republic of China. Where did they all go? Vancouver, Canada, which is now a booming economic metropolis because it's been flooded with wealth. That wealth could have come to the west coast of the United States. That wealth could be put to use creating jobs and expanding the economy here in America. But we were stupid. We said, no, you have to wait in line. Well, they didn't have time to wait in line, and they didn't want to come as refugees. They wanted to come as citizens. We should have let them buy their way in. That's the kind of out-of-the-box thinking that I think Donald Trump is capable of, that other politicians aren't, that could actually point the way towards a robust immigration system from which we all benefit.
Okay, just a couple of minutes left. Nassem, your thoughts on this out-of-the-box thinking by President Trump and the sort of the golden ticket style. What do you think?
I have no problem with a golden ticket, to bring wealthy people in the U.S. That's fine. But let's keep one thing in mind. The U.S. has a history of taking refugees who are not wealthy, they're poor, they are coming from famine situations, and they come into this country and they do very well. They build businesses. I mean, let's talk about the Irish in the 19th century who were fleeing starvation, the refugees after World War II, including many Jewish refugees, Cubans and Russians fleeing communism, Vietnam refugees. All these people came into this country without means, but they settled, they created businesses, they hired people, and they are very successful. So yes, if the gentleman wants people who are wealthy to come in, that's fine. But also our history of accepting refugees should continue, because I think those refugees have proven that they can be very successful and they build businesses that will hire Americans.
Okay, just before we wrap up, let me start by asking you, Nassem. I mean, we're coming up to the midterm. Well, we're a year away from the midterms, but we're about to sort of enter midterm season. Based on everything we've talked about, everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks, would you say immigration is going to be the hot button issue going into those elections, or just one of perhaps a number of issues?
I don't think it's going to be the hot issue. I think affordability, and frankly, what we've seen over the last 9 months or a year of the Trump family enriching themselves in various ways, I think those two, affordability and the Trump administration or Trump family accumulating wealth over the last 9 to 10 months, those are going to be the two main issues.
Okay, Nassem, you had the first word in this debate. Let's give Peter the last word. Peter, your thoughts?
I think, as always, economy and jobs are going to be the number one issue. And which party do you trust more to handle the economic challenges of the future is what most people will be casting their votes on. I think that the Democratic strategy of just saying Trump, Trump, Trump over again has worn thin with the voters. They want solutions. And I think that both in New Jersey and in Virginia, we saw that the Democrats offered more in the way of solutions than the Republican candidates, which is why you had a greater turnout among Democrats than Republicans from over what they were 4 years ago by significant numbers. The basic concerns right now, and I think Nassem is correct, have to do with affordability. So it's going to be the economy and jobs. I don't expect immigration, except as a part of the jobs conversation. There are people who foolishly argue that immigrants take jobs and affordable housing away from regular Americans. They call themselves Republicans, but I don't think of them as Republicans. I just think of them as stupid. And I'd like for them to crawl back under the rocks they came out from under. I want to be talking about, and I think the country needs to hear what the plans are to get the economy growing so that wages rise and prices are no longer giving you an attack of sticker shock every time you go online to buy something.
Okay. All right, we're going to have to leave it there, gentlemen. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Peter Roff, journalist in Washington, D.C. Thank you to you. Nassem Haffar, researcher in American affairs and Democratic Party member. Thank you very much indeed to you as well.